Well, in today's session, I'm so excited to talk about 3 goals for your ukulele playing journey going into the year 2023, if you can believe it. Now, goal setting this time of year is always a fun thing to do. And, one thing is these are just 3 recommendations I have for pretty much every player to help get a more well-rounded experience playing the ukulele. But I think certainly you can make your own goals and everything else as we go through it. The one thing I recommend is be realistic with your goals. Make goals that you can achieve and you'll do it. But let's go ahead and start with my 3 goals. And let's start with the first one that I have for you. And that is to bite less and chew more, which sounds kind of funny. But what I mean by this is we all too often get really overwhelmed by the amount that's on our plate of learning ukulele, right? There's so many different sources for material, so many different tutorials and things that you feel like you should be working on that sometimes you end up spending an hour just sort of trying to figure out what you should be practicing and never actually get around to doing something, right? So biting less, chewing more is trying to say, essentially, don't take so much on your plate. It's okay to take smaller amounts and focus on those smaller things as you go through. Instead of trying to work on 4 or 5 different songs at a time, maybe find 1 or 2 that fit your liking, what you enjoy playing, and really focus on honing in on those few songs. Try to do less, essentially, because you'll make a lot more progress by doing that. The number one pitfall I have for private lessons with students, or at least that they have when they're practicing, is that they're trying to do too much at all times. They're trying to juggle so many different things because there's so many cool things they want to do. And focusing in on those couple things that they really enjoy, that they can make good progress on, helps them make a lot more progress in the long run. Now, with this, it's not just how many different things you're working on, but also how you work on those individual things that you are playing. A lot of times people try to learn chord melody style playing, right? I love chord melody playing. You've probably noticed that if you're watching this video or seen other videos that I do. The thing about chord melody playing is it's usually a whole song that you're trying to learn. And that might be as many as, 48 plus measures, depending on the tune, right? It could be over 100 measures of music that you're trying to learn. And the problem people have is they start at the beginning of the song and they just practice all the way through until they get to the end. And then they might even finish their practice session there. But the problem with that is you don't really digest any of it when you practice going from the start of a tune all the way through the end. It can be kind of fun because you're working through the whole song, but it doesn't really help you progress very quickly with your playing or absorb what it is that you're working on. And that's why I like this analogy of bite less, chew more. Is if you're playing a song and you're starting at the top and you're going all the way through, you're taking lots of really big bites and you're not really chewing it before, ingesting it. And with this, what we want to do is make sure that what you are working on is something that you can really realistically handle. And by maybe working on only a musical moment at a time in a song, those smaller bites that you kind of chew on a little bit more, you'll find that you'll digest them a lot better and you'll make a ton more progress with what you're practicing and with what you're learning because you're giving yourself the opportunity to correctly process those things. So when you're working on a new song, let's say that you're working on, an arrangement of like a Christmas tune, for instance, right? Well, don't worry about doing the whole thing. Let's say you're working on like a tune like Jingle Bell Rock, right? Just as a random example here. If we look at Jingle Bell Rock, and I'm sitting here trying to play through the whole thing of Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell. If I'm trying to do all this stuff all the way through the song, it's going to be really difficult to make any sort of progress. So think about not necessarily measures, but think of like musical moments, right? What's the first musical moment in like Jingle Bell Rock? Well, maybe it's Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell, Jingle Bell Rock, right? And I might sit there and practice that and just get comfortable with that little motif, that little piece before moving on. Even if that motif sort of ends halfway through a bar, it's okay. You don't have to go measure by measure as you take your smaller bites. Sometimes it's helpful to go musical moment to musical moment, motif to motif. For me, that's hugely helpful with how I practice. And then I can work on the next one after I've, properly chewed that bite that I took. So my first recommendation to all of you is bite less, chew more. Try to work on less things and try to work on those things in smaller ways. And you'll find that your progress is going to expand a lot more quickly because of doing that sort of exercise. I all too often will be practicing, doing a new arrangement of a song for myself, and I never really make much progress with it because I'm just trying to do the whole thing at once. It's too much. My mouth is too full to chew, so to speak. So that's our first goal. Our second goal here is to step outside your comfort zone. So with the first goal, we talked about doing less, right? Finding things that you enjoy working on and not worrying about doing all sorts of other things with that. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a pitfall if you end up only practicing the few things that you were comfortable with and that you really enjoy doing. Because when you're learning a musical instrument, it's really important to do things that you don't necessarily think you'd like to do, because you might find that you love doing it. For me, it was jazz music. I'm not a big jazz listener. I don't really enjoy listening to jazz music. I kind of find it boring. Which, if you like jazz, no judgment there either way. It's just, for me, it didn't do much for me listening. And when I was in college, I was just taking as many music classes as I could with my ukulele. And there was a jazz workshop class. I thought, well, I should take it because I should learn this stuff, right? Become a more well-rounded musician, right? I was kind of stepping outside my comfort zone. And that class was one of the most important classes I ever took because it taught me so much about things I didn't know I needed to know. And there were things that I thought maybe I only needed to know for jazz music, but it turned out taking that course ended up opening up all of my playing in different ways and opening me to new perspectives that I never would have gained from just doing what I was already doing. You see, stepping outside your comfort zone gives you another perspective to kind of look into how you progress, how you process, how you play music. And oftentimes, going outside your comfort zone gives you a new perspective of your comfort zone to make it even more comfortable. You might learn something that you never would have unless you kind of went from the outside. And in addition to that, you might discover something that you absolutely love that you thought you never would. For me, with jazz music with that, I still don't really like listening to jazz for the most part, but I love playing it. I absolutely love playing it. It's a lot of fun. It's very engaging. Again, I don't really like listening to it, but I love playing it. That doesn't seem like it should go hand in hand. But if I didn't sort of step outside my comfort zone and try to work in this jazz class, I never would have learned so many of the different parts of the playing that I love to do today. And so for me with jazz, it taught sort of two things. One is, pushed me out of my comfort zone. I learned all sorts of chord voicings and things that I never really would have needed elsewhere, right? A lot of these 7 chords and things like that as I go through. And a side effect was I started to use some of that theory that I learned for jazz with my everyday playing and add a new sort of dimension and spin to it, which is really what made it special. And so after I took that course, a lot of my originals started having a little bit different of chord voicings and things. A little bit of that jazz, flavoring was added into my playing. And it's not necessarily that now I'm playing everything is jazz, but it just added that different perspective. And that's what's so critical. So for you, what's outside of your comfort zone? Are you somebody who strums and sings songs all the time, right? And maybe plays in a uke club or something? Maybe try doing some chord melody stuff. Try doing some very basic arrangements and see, if you can start playing in that kind of chord melody style. Are you somebody who primarily plays chord melody, but never really strums and sings or plays with other people? Maybe it's the opposite for you. Maybe you need to try to do some of that, because if you are somebody who plays chord melody and doesn't strum much, well, you probably don't strum much in your chord melody, right? If you go to a uke club, start getting comfortable strumming with other people, you might find that strumming works its way into your chord melody arrangements. And if you're somebody who, primarily strums and doesn't play chord melody, you might find working on chord melody arrangements allows you to do a little bit of soloing or something when you're playing with your friends and people that you're performing with, right? So the going outside your comfort zone not only helps you grow as a musician in terms of doing something different, but it gives you something different that you can bring back to what you already know and hopefully have a different perspective, which makes it, again, just tons of fun. Pcash says, should I try to perfect the measures before going on? Sometimes there's a couple difficult measures that keep me from moving on, and then I get frustrated and makes learning slow, which I think has to do with that first part that we're talking about with, bite less, chew more. And we'll talk more about that as we get to the end of the session. But the gist of it is there's no such thing as perfect. And so you want to get comfortable before sort of moving on. And this applies for the second thing too, when you're going outside your comfort zone. If you're somebody who's normally a perfectionist and you're working on something, it's okay to not get it perfect before moving on. At the same time, if you always move on to things before you get it to maybe 75% or so, maybe be a little bit more of a perfectionist with a song or two and see how good you can make it before you move on, right? Going outside of what's normal for you will help create different perspectives. But we'll come back to that question too as we go through. So the third goal I have for your ukulele journey is, for a lot of people, the toughest one to hear, including myself. And that is, learn to enjoy the journey because there is no destination, which sounds kind of weird, right? But I get a lot of private students who kick off the lesson and they say, I want to learn X, whatever X is, right? It's like, I want to learn this Jake Shimabukuro arrangement. I want to learn this arrangement, that Evan did, or I want to learn how to jam with my friends with this, right? It's like a tangible, singular goal. And they say, if I could do that, I think I'd have fun. And that's a dangerous mindset to have, because those markers, those indicators, when we set them as destinations, we sort of make everything that leads up to that destination kind of irrelevant, right? It's just like, I want to get here, and you kind of ignore the journey that you're on before you're there. And then if you do get there, there's nowhere else that you're moving towards, right? And goals are important. We're setting goals right now, right? Markers of where you're at are great. But a really important thing to realize early on in your journey is that every moment you pick up and practice your ukulele, that's what it's all about. It's not about practicing towards a certain point. It's about growth in the moment. It's about when you pick up your ukulele and you start practicing, if you improve at something and you feel that improvement, you enjoy that improvement in that moment, that's what it's all about. It's all about those little victories. Because nobody just learns a song overnight, really. They learn it over these little victories as they're practicing throughout the weeks and months leading up to it. And you need to learn to enjoy those moments and those steps. That sort of process of learning is what it's all about. And, people make all sorts of analogies with this. They talk about like how they need to, if you focus too much on the destination, you'll, forget the journey on the way or whatever, It's not like driving a car from point A to point B. It's a lot like life. If you use the life analogy for a moment, and you think, oh, everything's going to be great when I turn 65 and retire. Once I hit that, everything's great. Well, if you just have that mindset, then you're kind of missing out on some of life leading up to retirement, right? And then when you get there, it's sort of like, okay, I'm done, Enjoying those moments and living in those singular moments are really critical to having a fulfilling life, just like it is to having a fulfilling practice routine and experience learning a musical instrument. Every time you pick it up and play it, that should be the reason why you continue to play it. Not because of what you'll be able to do later, but because of what you're doing right now in that moment. And progress will happen, and you will develop, and you will do things that you never thought you could, as long as you focus on what you're doing in that moment each time. And this is, again, a tough one for a lot of people, because they think they just need to get to a certain point and they'll be there. They'll be where they want to be. But where they want to be doesn't really exist. And to go with that, people think, oh, if I play something this well, I'll have arrived at my destination, right? And for me, this happened. I remember when I was learning the ukulele and starting to get really into it, I remember thinking, if I could learn Jake Shimabukuro's While My Guitar Gently Weeps arrangement, then I'll never need to know anything else, right? If I could play that, I'd be happy and nothing else would matter, right? And let's put that right here, right? And I was down here. And as I got closer to that goal, what happened was the goal moved. And as I got closer, the goal kind of crept away, because once I was playing the arrangement, I wasn't playing it very well. So I was like, well, once I could play it well, I'll be ecstatic, right? It's not just play it. I got to play it well. And as I was getting closer to playing it well, it was like, well, I want to play other songs too. So maybe if I could play like 3 or 4 Jake songs, then I'd be happy, right? Then I'll be satisfied. And then as I was approaching there, it was like, well, I got to do my own arrangements too. So maybe once I do 3 or 4 arrangements myself, then I'll be happy. Then it'll be there, right? And it just kept going and going and going. And it's still this same process. I still want to be here, and I'm here. And guess what? In a few years, when I'm here, I'm going to want to be here. And recognizing that, and that's part of the journey, is an important step to your kind of acceptance. And it helps you make a lot more progress with your playing. Because if you focus more on what you're doing in the moment and what you can do and how what you're doing can help you do new things, will help you do those new things instead of thinking, oh, I'm not there. I'm not going to get there, or I need to get there. Or, if you're always thinking ahead, it can be very difficult to make that progress in the moment. And so that's my third sort of tip for you guys, is learn to enjoy the journey, because there's no destination. If you enjoy the process, you're going to just love every moment that you spend with this instrument, just like I do. It's fun every time I pick it up, not because of what I'm thinking I'm going to do eventually, but rather because of what I'm doing in that moment, whatever it might be. So just to recap, our 3 goals for your ukulele journey in 2023 is to bite less, chew more, right? Try to do less stuff. Don't worry about doing a million different arrangements. Try to focus on just a couple at a time. 1, 2, maybe 3. Try to do less. And with the less that you're working on, work on smaller pieces of it as you're practicing. Instead of trying to play through the whole song start to finish all the time, try to work on little musical moments and linking those moments together. And if one practice session, all that you do is a few bars of music, if you're learning something like Jingle Bell Rock and your only practice session is going, that's fine, because then that moment will build to the next and the next and the next. Smaller bites, chew more. The second tip that we're talking about is stepping outside your comfort zone. So if you're normally somebody who plays a certain style of music, maybe try a song that you wouldn't normally try, just to give yourself the opportunity to do it. If you play a certain style of playing, maybe you're more of a finger picker and don't really strum much, try some strumming. If you're vice versa and you're more of a strummer, don't do much finger picking, try some of that. Not only will it open you to new different possibilities within your own playing, in terms of what you already know, but it will also allow you to get different perspectives and take that to different places. So learning how to finger pick as a strummer won't just give you the finger picking skill, it will also maybe open up some new doors with strumming that only a finger picker's perspective could give. And the third tip there is to learn to enjoy the journey, because there is no destination, right? It's all about the process. It's about finding fulfillment within that process, enjoying the moment that you're in with that process, and trying to find the most, satisfaction you can in those moments, because really what we have is whatever moment we're experiencing, and we should take full advantage of that. Don't think about, if I got here, then I'd be happy. Find the happiness and joy of where you are right now, and how what you can do can continue to help you evolve and grow within those moments. So I'm going to open up to questions right now. So if you're watching this live, feel free to leave a comment in chat. If you're watching this as a recording, there are always messages on the Rock Class 101 forum, and I'll be answering those too as we go through. So if you're unable to make these live, you can leave your question there. I saw a few great questions in there. First, I want to get to Pcash's question from earlier in the live stream. Should I try to perfect the measures before going on? Sometimes there's a couple of difficult measures that keep me from moving on, and then I can get frustrated and makes learning really slow. Perfection doesn't exist, is really the reality with it. And some people are too much of perfectionists and other people are too little of it. And I like to think about 75% is what I go for. And what I mean by that is, if I'm trying to learn how to play a section of music, if I can play it 75% of what I want, then I'm on the right track. For some people, 75% is playing all of the exact correct notes in the correct time, but the tone might not be perfect. For others, 75% might be just getting through 75% of the notes and making a few mistakes here and there. whatever that 75% is for you, or whatever that 100% is for you, find it and then go to 75% of it for your realistic goal setting to be able to then move on, because it can be very frustrating if you don't get it perfect. But perfect doesn't exist. So find your perfect and go 75% of that. Bcash also says, I always remember your quote, always something, not all or nothing. Great advice. Yeah, my student Wendy, if you're watching this, the best quote ever. Always something, not all or nothing, right? And it applies to like everything in life. And so with practice, same sort of thing, right? Always something, not all or nothing. You don't have to do everything perfectly. Just always do something. Ron says, I'm sure you covered it, but one of my goals is to learn the fretboard. Suggestions on how to break it down. Really great question, and kind of a difficult question to answer, because learning the fretboard and memorizing the fretboard are two different things. And a lot of people do the latter thinking it's the former, and that's not the case, right? You articulated very well saying learn the fretboard, and I think that's the important step, right? So just to take you a little bit on the journey for me learning the fretboard, I never memorized the fretboard. I never got a graph and worked through that and, memorize that. I tried and it never stuck. For me, the way I learned the fretboard is I needed to learn the fretboard. And what I mean by that is I started doing arrangements, for instance. I started doing chord melody arrangements where I would have a piece of sheet music and I'd have to translate it to the ukulele. And with that, I'd have a fretboard map right on my screen or on my desk or whatever. And I would be looking to that all the time. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes people think, oh, you should just do it, without the chart. Well, it's okay to use the chart if it's allowing you to do the stuff. And as you use the chart, you might find that you start using the chart less and less the more you do it. Or maybe you forget the chart and you have to go through it and try to, work without that chart. Needing to know the fretboard is what's going to allow you to learn it. And so do arrangements. Do things that force you to look at the fretboard and know what these notes are, and you'll find that you'll learn it. In fact, when I started teaching ukulele about 13 years ago, I think now, my first lessons, I'd always have a chart on the desktop of the fretboard. I didn't know the fretboard yet, right? And I was teaching a lot and doing a lot of arrangements and learning myself how to do all this stuff. And one day I remember being in a lesson and I didn't pull open my fretboard map. And I realized I hadn't pulled out my fretboard map in a while, and I was still knowing where the notes were as I went through because I was getting the experience learning it. So I think, don't think as much, I need to learn the fretboard. Think more, what can I do that will force me to need to know the fretboard? What other things can I learn where this is integral? For me, that was arranging. For some, it might be, learning scales or soloing or whatever it might be. But try to find something that forces you to need to learn the fretboard, as opposed to just say, oh, I'm going to learn the fretboard. It's like, why, right? There's no context there. So create context. Fort Ecker, how often do you practice with a metronome? Not nearly enough. Metronome practice is very good, very important, but it also depends on the type of player, type of thing they're working on, and everything else. I've actually doing a new video on my YouTube channel that's on how to find the right strum pattern or strumming technique for a song. And I talk a little bit about finding the pulse of the song, which is essentially the metronome, right? The clapping the hands, tapping the foot, snapping the fingers. It's this, all right? And so practicing with a metronome can really help you develop a very good pulse with your playing, and the accountability is very good. And so I think spend some time with a metronome, incorporate it in your practice, and but don't let it define your practice, and don't let it dominate your practice in a way that makes it discouraging to pick up the ukulele. If you're a solo player like me and you mostly play by yourself, the timing that's created by a metronome is less important than somebody who's playing in an ensemble. And in fact, if I practiced with a metronome too much and I had perfect timing, perfect pulse with every song, it wouldn't be as much fun to listen to, because playing with that sort of emotion, that what we call rubato, playing with emotion, is created by tempo sort of fluctuating a bit. The fine line there, though, is your fluctuation of tempo because you're uncomfortable playing in time, or is it because you're expressing yourself musically? And if you find yourself more expressing yourself musically, it's less important to work with the metronome. If you find yourself more, I don't really have the timing right, then practice more with the metronome. So there's some great questions here on the forum. I'm just going to start reading through them. The first one's from Gigi. Okay, great. I must learn to improvise this year. I already placed a request on the request list for the option to improvise using a certain scale as part of a challenge. I have a looper and would like to incorporate this with a newfound hope of improvisation. That's fantastic. Improvising is so great. One recommendation I have for you as you're learning to improvise is learn melodies and then learn how to play those melodies over chords, because all great improvisation is just essentially made up melodies on the spot. Every good solo is just a melody. So if you can learn melodies to songs, you can use those to kind of manipulate them and create really good solos. So my tip for getting good at improvising, learn lots of melodies, build up that vocabulary. Surfer J says, my 3 ukulele goals would be: 1, learn at least 2 fingerstyle arrangements that are above my play level. Break them down 1 bar at a time until I can play them. That's fantastic. That really leans into that, bite less, chew more. To go with that, though, don't necessarily think 1 bar at a time. If that works for you, absolutely do it. Bars are a fantastic indicator. But if you find that chops up the song a little bit, think of it like, musical moment at a time. Think of it as like a phrase that's said musically, even if that's like halfway or a third way through 1 bar into another. That can sometimes help with learning. I think that doing both, learning it by musical moment to moment and bar to bar, is the most complete way to practice it. Number 2, a lot of stuff I play is maybe 90% finished, but that final 10% would be a more polished performance. I'd like to revisit my set list and put the cherry on the cake. Yeah, that final 10% usually comes from the second thing we talked about, going outside your comfort zone. For me, most of the times I've gotten comfortable enough with a song is when I stopped playing that song and played something else, and that something else happened to give me the perspective I needed for that last 10%. So if you're really struggling getting that last 10%, go do something else, maybe something that's similar, maybe something that's very different, and you might find your answer when you're not looking for it while working on another tune. Number 3, win the lottery, move to Hawaii, and buy the ukulele site. Play the ukuleles all day with Corey and Calais and special guests who happen to be on the podcast. That's perfect, right? The most fun I've ever had in my life playing the ukulele was on the Ukulele Site podcast a few months ago with Corey and Calais. They are the best. It's just so much fun. So yeah, I approve that message. Camper says, my goal is to learn the notes on the ukulele playing. Happy birthday, twinkle twinkle little star, and learn the words to above songs, and most importantly, play the songs by memory. I think that's fantastic. Those are great songs that teach melodic concepts on the ukulele to learn both the note positions on the fretboard and some really good stuff. So I think that's great. Gigi says, to Surfer J, jamming with Corey and Calais would be amazing. They're my faves. That's why I need to start learning how to improv this year, so that ever given a chance, I would be ready. Of course, it's taken them 30,000 hours to get where they are, but we have to start somewhere. Yeah, right? So as somebody who's played with Corey and Calais, and also somebody who is not like at that 30,000 mark that Corey and Calais, it can be daunting, right? But I will tell you right now, what allowed me to play with them and feel some confidence was just being able to play the melodies of the songs we were going through. And if I had to take a solo, I just would kind of play off of that melody. That's what got me through it. So it's fun that comment's there, because it really did apply for me. The Bumble Bard's still my favorite screen name of all time. I hope this would be the topic this month, so I tried to give a good solid thing. My 3 main uke goals for 2023. Strumming. Learn to strum better than a poorly trained capuchin monkey. Is that how you say that? I'm sure you're already better than that. Unless the monkey has great natural rhythm, then we're both probably worse than the monkey, and that's okay. Number 2, play the uke in front of others more often and places up beside my chamber of solitude and secret melodies. Yeah, so that's a way to put yourself outside the comfort zone, right? It's not just what you're learning outside your comfort zone, it's how you're learning it outside the comfort zone, right? Playing in front of people is something that you might not be comfortable with at all, and it will make you just a better player. So that's a great way to go to that, going outside your comfort zone. And then number 3, create a chord melody that can be classified as neat. I think that's great too. Also, start a blog so that all this wayward energy can go there. Thank you so much for the crazy, fun, and enlightening year. Gail, oh, sorry, wrong page. Oh my gosh, that's magical. She's making a reference to my Patreon page with a song vote there. Someday something with the Gale should win. Yeah. But fantastic comments with there. Strumming, learn to strum better than a poorly trained monkey. I think it's great. We've got a strumming course here on Rock Class 101 that I gave that ties into a strumming course I have available on my website. And so those are definitely things to check out, including the video I mentioned earlier that I'm releasing on my YouTube video today. But it's all these different perspectives that can really help. And that's where, going back to like here on Rock Class 101 can be so helpful, because Rock Class 101 has this fantastic learning paths program that you should all check out. What it does is it breaks things down into sort of 3 different levels depending on your skill level and your experience with the ukulele, to help you with your journey, to show you some examples that will really help you use the skills that you've already acquired and create new ones too. In a lot of ways, it's going to give you all 3 of the steps of what we're talking about here in the goal setting today. So if you're looking to really improve your playing and take it to that next level, please check out the learning pathways here on Rock Class 101, because it's a great way to make that next level progress. Let's go and see if there are any other questions here. A few of my patrons are in this live stream, which is great to see. Thank you guys for coming. I don't see any other comments there. Any other questions in the chat? If you have any questions, feel free to leave them. This is your chance for me to answer them. But just to kind of recap, we had those 3 different goals that we set, right? We had the first goal, which is bite less and chew more. And all that means is don't worry about working on so many things. Work on less stuff. Get more comfortable with that stuff. And as you're working on the smaller amounts of stuff, work on it in smaller fashions. Don't worry about doing the whole song. Do a couple bars or a couple musical moments at a time. Get comfortable with those and continue to move on. You'll find that you'll actually be able to digest a lot more, or at least a lot more effectively, when you bite off less than you can chew. Number 2 is step outside your comfort zone. So whether that's working on styles of music that you're not comfortable with, or that's working on styles of playing, like maybe you're a finger picker, try some strumming, or as the Bumblebard said in chat, that could be playing in environments you're not comfortable with. If you normally practice in your room on your own, maybe go out to a park and play in front of other people. Do things to step outside your comfort zone, and you'll find it'll develop all sorts of new skills. And then number 3 was learn to enjoy the destination, or excuse me, learn to enjoy the process or the journey, because there is no destination. It's always about the moment we're in and that we're practicing with. That's what it's all about. And so the more you can enjoy that process and the more you can enjoy yourself in that moment, the better off your ukulele playing journey will be, and the more you'll really love picking it up each and every time you play, because you're not thinking about, oh, in 3 years I'll be able to do this, but rather you're focusing on, hey, right now I can do this. And that's pretty great. So, well, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this live stream. Again, if you're watching this as a recording, we do one of these live streams every second Tuesday of the month at noon Pacific time. I know it's a weird time, but I've got a kid in kindergarten. It's the time that works with him at school. But if you're ever not able to make it live, check out Rock Class 101, where there's a forum post made each time on this where your questions can be answered. Thank you guys so much for an incredible 2022. I can't wait to see you guys all in 2023 with lots of new lessons and different things like that. So stay tuned here at Rock Class 101 for all sorts of new stuff coming out soon. Thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.